Good evening. Over in Pennsylvania, one of the counties which was asked to hand over their election materials for an audit has decided to not comply. They are refusing to participate in the forensic audit, which means that a lawsuit is inevitably coming down the pipeline. Meanwhile, over in Washington, D.C., parents over there have filed a lawsuit over a new law. What law? Well, almost unbelievably, for the last 4 months, schools in Washington, D.C. have been allowed to vaccinate children in secret without telling their parents. And lastly, 2 days ago, it was announced that Mologic, which is a COVID-19 testing company, they're the ones that designed that back-of-the-nose COVID test, they have just been bought out by a consortium backed by both George Soros as well as Bill Gates. Now, why exactly did Soros and Gates purchase this company? Well, let's go through that together. This is your daily Facts Matter update, and I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Now let's begin today's discussion over in Pennsylvania. But actually, just before we do, as a super quick aside, right there at the top of the description box is a link to Epoch TV, which is our brand new no censorship video platform where you can find all of the awesome Epoch Times video programs, like American Thought Leaders, Counterculture with Danielle D'Souza, Cash's Corner with Cash Patel, Real Talk with Wayne Dupree, California Insider, China in Focus, Crossroads with Joshua Phillip, as well as our show Facts Matter. And on there you will find exclusive episodes that, frankly, due to the censorship, we just don't put here on YouTube. Again, that link will be right there at the top of the description box. I hope you check it out. And now let's really move on over to Pennsylvania. As we already discussed in a previous episode, a state senator out in Pennsylvania, he sent letters to 3 different counties and officially triggered a probe of the 2020 election. Now, in that letter, that senator, who by the way is named Doug Mastriano, he's a Republican, he requested all of the documents, all of the records, as well as the voting machines and the tabulators which were used during the 2020 contest. However, it looks like things will not go as smoothly as he might have expected. That's because just last week, one of these 3 counties, they announced that they will be refusing to comply with this request and will not allow the state Senate to access their voting machines to be audited. For your reference, by the way, the 3 counties that were sent the letters were Philadelphia, York, and Tioga counties. And it's Tioga County which just announced that it will not comply. Now, there's a bit of a backstory here because about 2 weeks ago, Pennsylvania's Department of State, which is the agency in charge of the elections, they're the executive agency which is in charge of the elections, they issued a new directive which told the local counties that they, and this was a quote from the directive, that they shall not provide third parties with any access which would allow them to examine either the voting machines or any of their component parts, things like tabulators or ballot printers. Furthermore, that directive from the State Department, it said that if the counties do hand over their voting machines for inspection, then the equipment will be considered no longer secure or reliable to use in subsequent elections. Meaning that the Department of State will essentially force the county to spend millions of dollars in purchasing new machines if the machines that they already have undergo a forensic inspection. And it looks like that directive was strong enough to have Tioga County reject the Senate's request for an audit. In fact, we here at the Epoch Times, we actually reached out to Tioga County for comment, and here's what the county solicitor, he got back to us, and here's what he told us. We've been given the directive that we cannot give access or they will decertify our machines. The state did 2 audits after the election. Nothing of significance was found. Now, besides Tioga County, York County has raised objections as well. In fact, they sent a response letter to Senator Mastriano questioning whether he has the legal authority to compel them to provide election-related materials at all. Now, we here at the Epoch Times, we were actually able to get a copy of this letter, and their basic argument is that the committee that Senator Doug Mastriano is the chairman of, which for your reference is the Senate Intergovernmental Operations Committee, they say that this is not the committee which is in charge of elections oversight. These officials argue that elections are actually handled by the State Government Committee. It's 2 different committees, and they're saying that essentially this committee does not have the authority to compel anything from them, only this other committee does. Here's what they wrote, quote, "As a result, we believe that there may be a lack of jurisdiction over this issue, which should be addressed and determined internally between the committees and the legislature that created these committees." Now again, this letter is not a refusal to comply. Instead, these county officials are questioning which committee has jurisdiction. It's more of a technical objection. They added, in fact, in this letter that they are still open to complying with the requests if subpoenas are ultimately issued. In fact, here's what they wrote. Quote, "Should the committee decide to subpoena such an analysis and provide comprehensive answers to all the above questions, we could more properly consider such request." And so it seems like over in York County, their objection is more procedural. However, it looks like it doesn't actually matter which of these two committees is in charge of election oversight, because we here at the Epoch Times, we got a chance to speak with Pennsylvania State Senator Dave Argel, who is, by the way, the chairman of the State Government Committee, and he said that he is also in support of conducting a forensic audit, meaning that very likely, regardless of which committee actually has jurisdiction over election oversight, the audit will go through because they're both in support of having a forensic audit. Now, the other county, which is Philadelphia County, they have yet to make their decision public, whether they are for the audit or not, or whether they're going to turn over their election materials or not. For your reference, they have until July 31st, which is the last day of this month, to decide whether or not to comply. Now, if the counties don't comply, or if they don't agree to comply by July 31st, very likely what will happen is that subpoenas will be issued for all of the requested election-related materials. Now, we here at the Epoch Times, we got a chance to speak with Doug Mastriano, who is, again, the senator who is calling for this audit. He's the one who sent letters initiating this forensic audit, and here's what he told us. And by the way, when he refers to the Wolf administration, he's referring to Tom Wolf, who is the Democrat governor of Pennsylvania. We do have grave concerns that the Wolf administration is continuing to weaponize the State Department just like they did in 2020. In this case, the department is being used to intimidate county officials and obstruct a Senate-led forensic investigation of the 2020 and 2021 elections. Now, in that same statement, he further went on to say that the directive by the State Department actually crossed the line and infringed on the authority of the legislature. Here's what he said. This threat, disguised as a directive to all counties in Pennsylvania, is an attack on the autonomy of local officials and the General Assembly's power to review, investigate, and legislate in matters within its legislative authority, which includes Pennsylvania's elections system. The legislature has clear authority, both statutorily and constitutionally, to provide oversight and issue subpoenas. And so, what will very likely occur is similar to what happened over in Arizona, where just getting the audit off the ground took about 5 months of legal back and forth as different county officials refused to comply with either requests or subpoenas. We'll just have to wait and see whether that actually plays out over in Pennsylvania. And again, the counties have until July 31st, which is not this Saturday, but next Saturday, to issue an official response to the state. Until then, if you would like to read more about Tioga County's response or about York County's response, including this letter right here, all that will be linked in the description box below this video for you to check out. And now, let's move on over and talk about how schools are conducting secret vaccinations on children over in Washington, D.C. Oh, sorry. What's this? Well, that's a great question, Roman. And the answer is that it's today's sponsor, which is an awesome messaging company called Sekur. And it's awesome if you're the type of person that actually cares about your privacy. Because it goes without saying that both government actors as well as big tech companies can spy on your documents, your emails, and your chat messages. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced it before where you're messaging someone or emailing someone about a certain product or service, and then suddenly you're seeing ads for that exact same product or service. I mean, it's pretty obvious what's going on behind the scenes. However, with Sekur, they have an answer to that problem because they have their own proprietary encryption technology, which allows you to send text messages, documents, as well as emails and keep them safe and private. And largely, that's because they have their servers and their data center over in Switzerland. Now, why is that important? Well, Switzerland has the strictest data privacy laws in the entire world. That's what they say. And therefore, your messages are not subject to the Intrusive Cloud Act. And if you're interested to know what the Cloud Act is, you can go over to their website, to Sekur's website, and they have a great explanation for it. And in my opinion, the best thing about Sekur over the other messaging apps that are out there is that you can communicate securely even if the recipient of your message does not use Sekur. Basically, you send a message to them, let's say you send a text, and it sends them a link. They click on that link, and it establishes a secure connection that goes through Switzerland so that you can chat with them securely and privately, even if they don't have Sekur themselves. So go on over to Sekur.com, which is Sekur.com, and use promo code Roman to save 25% off. Their services don't cost that much. It's only $5 for the messenger and $10 for the email and the messenger package, and you can even save 25% off when you use the promo code Roman. Now, Sekur, thank you so much for sponsoring our episode. Now, Roman in the studio, back to you. Now, imagine this for a moment. You live in our nation's capital. You're at home, it's 3:30 in the afternoon, and you're just sitting around the house enjoying a quiet day when suddenly your kid comes home from school. You look at him and you ask, "Hey, Billy, how was your day?" And Billy looks at you and says, "It was all right. I learned some math, I learned some history, and then the nurse came by and she vaccinated me." And then you look at him and you think, "What? I don't remember consenting to such a thing. How could they inject my child with anything without first consulting me?" Well, this theoretical situation is exactly what parents over in Washington, D.C. are currently facing. And in fact, 4 parents have just filed a lawsuit against the District of Columbia, alleging that a new law which allows vaccinations like this to take place, deprives parents of their constitutional right, as well as endangers children's safety by allowing minors as young as 11 years old to get vaccinated without their parents' consent or knowledge. Here's specifically how the lawyer who's representing these parents, here's how she described the situation. The law is reckless, unconstitutional, and needlessly endangers children's lives by stripping away parental protection and the protection of the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986. Now, the law in question, the law that she referred to in that statement, is relatively new. It's called the Minor Consent for Vaccinations Amendment Act of 2020, and it came into effect over in Washington, D.C. last March. And therefore, it's been on the books for only the past 4 months. And this new law, it allows children who are 11 years of age or older, so basically as long as they're at least 11 years old, to take any vaccines, including the COVID vaccine, without their parents' consent or knowledge, as long as 2 criteria are met. The vaccine has to be recommended by the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, and as long as the child is, and this is a quote from the law, capable of meeting the informed consent standard, meaning essentially that they can nod their heads yes. Here's specifically what the law states. A minor shall be deemed to meet the informed consent standard if the minor is able to comprehend the need for, the nature of, and any significant risks ordinarily inherent in the medical care. Furthermore, and almost unbelievably, under this new law, the school can actually hide these vaccinations from parents. Let me just repeat that. The school has the authority to vaccinate kids in secret and then prevent parents from finding out about it. For instance, let's say that you applied for a religious exemption or you opted your kid out from taking a certain vaccine. Under this new law, your child can still decide for himself to take the vaccine, and then the healthcare provider who actually administers the vaccine, they can leave a certain part of the immunization record blank so the parents won't find out. You heard that right. The law requires that the healthcare provider should send the immunization record directly to the child's school, and then the school should keep it confidential. Furthermore, here's what the law says about insurance. Healthcare providers shall seek reimbursement without parental consent directly from the insurer, and the insurer shall not send an explanation of benefits for services provided. Meaning that the entire process can be clandestine without the parents ever finding out. Now, this new lawsuit, the one that was brought forth by the 4 parents, argues that by doing this, by allowing children to make these kinds of decisions and then hiding the facts from the parents, the law actually places the decision-making power squarely in the hands of the government. Here's another statement from the parents' lawyer, the lawyer who is representing the parents in this case. Here's what she said. The D.C. Act has dire implications for the health of children. If parents do not know their children were vaccinated at school, they may not recognize vaccine adverse reactions. Serious adverse reactions require immediate medical treatment and are contraindications to further vaccination. Now, we here at the Epoch Times, we reached out to the mayor of Washington, D.C. for comment, but she has yet to get back to us. However, here's a statement from Washington, D.C.'s public school chancellor, who was appointed by the mayor. Take a look. The science is clear. Vaccines are the single most effective tool we have to stop the spread of the coronavirus. To help meet our commitment to fully reopen schools for every student, every day in the fall, it is our responsibility as a community to get vaccinated, including our middle school and high school students. And obviously, it looks like they are getting fairly aggressive with pursuing that goal. Now, if you'd like to read more about this law out in Washington, D.C., or about this new lawsuit, which is challenging it in court, the links to all that will be down in the description box below this video for you to check out. However, while we are on the topic of vaccines and COVID generally, I would like to discuss a major corporate buyout. 2 days ago, it was announced that a consortium backed by George Soros and Bill Gates is conducting a buyout of Mologic, which is a COVID-19 testing company. Now, if you're familiar with those tests for COVID where the swab goes deep into the back of the nose, well, Mologic is the company that developed that test. And now, they have been bought out by these 2 billionaires. Although the corporate structure of the buyout is a little confusing, in fact, let's go through it together via the statement that came from the Soros Economic Development Fund, which, by the way, is an arm of George Soros's Open Society Foundations. And in this statement, which was released 2 days ago, it lays out the purchase in this way, it describes it in this way, quote, a group of philanthropic funds and investors led by the Soros Economic Development Fund, with support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, is today announcing the launch of Global Access Health. The members of Global Access Health will invest at least $41 million in this deal. The transaction involves the acquisition by the investing consortium of all Mologic's existing shares. And so, to the best of my understanding, here's what it looks like. The Soros Economic Development Fund, which is an arm of the Open Society Foundations, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as potentially other investors whom this letter doesn't specifically name, they formed a social enterprise called Global Access Health. Then, the members who form this enterprise, they will invest at least $41 million, completely buy out Malogic, and transform it from a for-profit company into what they call a social enterprise. Now, the big question is why? Why exactly are they doing this? Well, to start with, let's discuss what Malogic actually does. As a company, it was founded 18 years ago back in 2003, and they work to develop testing technology. They develop testing for things like infections, viruses, and so on. And according to this statement, this new consortium will integrate Malogic with another company called Global Access Diagnostic. Now, the purpose of this integration is to, at least according to this statement, work in conjunction to provide low-cost diagnostic testing for countries over in South Asia as well as in Africa, which they say, and this is a quote, help combat tropical diseases such as dengue, bilharzia, and river blindness, as well as for COVID-19. Now, the president of Malogic, he seemed to be very welcoming of this change. In fact, here's a statement that he made after this buyout was announced. Malogic's transition into a social enterprise is a deliberate, logical, and natural step for a company focused on delivering affordable diagnostics and biotechnology to places that have been left underserved by the relentless pursuit of profiteering. With the support of our shareholders, donors, and partners, we have come a long way. We believe we have the people and the skills required for the challenges and opportunities ahead, and we hope this unique transaction will be an example for others to follow. Now, after that announcement was made, quite a few people were surprised by the involvement of George Soros' foundation, since most people associate him with funding left-wing political causes rather than health-related measures. For instance, prior to the 2020 election, George Soros launched a super PAC called the Democracy PAC, and he himself donated $5.1 million to it, which at that time was the single biggest contribution of any mega donor during the election. Furthermore, he has received quite a bit of blowback for providing massive amounts of funding to the election campaigns of left-wing prosecutors as well as district attorneys across the entire country, such as Kim Gardner, George Gaskin, Kim Fox, Larry Krasner, and Marilyn Mosby. However, there is a weird phenomenon when it comes to George Soros, because even though his left-wing philanthropy is open knowledge, it seems like you just cannot talk about it. And when you do, you get shut down. For example, take a look at this clip here from Fox News and notice how the anchors handle it when Newt Gingrich, who is the former Speaker of the House, when he talks about George Soros. Take a look.
Progressive district attorneys are anti-police, pro-criminal, and overwhelmingly elected with George Soros' money, and they're a major cause of the violence we're seeing because they keep putting the violent criminals back on the street.
I'm not sure we need to bring George Soros into this.
I was going to say you get the last word, Speaker.
He paid for it. I mean, why can't we discuss the fact that millions of dollars he spent?
I agree with Melissa. George Soros doesn't need to be a part of this conversation.
Okay. So it's verboten.
All right, we're going to. Okay, we're going to move on.
Regardless, if you would like to read more about this new virus testing venture, as well as George Soros' and Bill Gates' involvement in it, including this statement right here by the Soros Foundation, all that will be linked down there in the description box below this video for you to check out. And lastly, as we have already mentioned in several previous episodes, on the very same day that Joe Biden was sworn into office, YouTube made the unilateral decision to demonetize our program. We can now no longer run any ads before, during, or after our episodes, and the Super Chat feature has mysteriously been disabled. They're essentially snuffing out our ability to monetize our content, which is, by the way, besides any type of throttling and censorship that we've always experienced. However, we here at the Epoch Times, we did not take it lying down, and instead we created something very cool. It's called Epoch TV. It's our brand new no-censorship video platform where you can find all of the awesome Epoch Times video programs, like American Thought Leaders, Crossroads with Joshua Phillip, Counterculture with Danielle D'Souza, Cash's Corner with Cash Patel, Real Talk with Wayne Dupree, California Insider, Life and Times, China in Focus, and of course our show Facts Matter. And as I mentioned earlier, on there we publish exclusive episodes that you just will not find here on YouTube. Again, that link to Epoch TV will be right there at the top of the description box. I hope you click on it. I hope you check it out. I hope you subscribe. And I hope that you join us on this journey of exploring this beautiful, beautiful world through honest journalism that's based in truth and tradition. Now, lastly, if you haven't already, smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe to this YouTube channel in order to get this type of honest news content delivered directly into your YouTube feed while YouTube still allows it. You can also follow me on Instagram if you have an account at Epoch Times Roman. I publish memes and behind-the-scenes research. And then until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed and stay free.